Welcome to the first edition of the Book Readers Talks. Our guest today is my husband, Mr. Jitendra Marathe. He is a senior professional working in the finance field. He is an avid reader and passionate about languages and movies. Let us talk to him today and see which author he is going to talk about. Welcome, Jitendra.
Good morning, and my greetings to E-Prasaran and all listeners of E-Prasaran also.
I would like to start by asking you about your love for reading. How did it all begin?
Right. I think that takes me back more than 40 or 45 years. I remember that I was possibly in fifth or sixth standard of the SSC curriculum. So possibly I was 11 or 12 years of age. And my grandfather, that was the inspirational source. He was an avid reader, and at our small home, he had managed to maintain a very small library or a personal store, I would call it, which contained many books. Many of them contained some material on history. And I remember that there was a book called, it was a Marathi book, but the rough English translation would be 6 Golden Pages in Indian history. So that interested me in reading itself. That was a fascinating book on the history and some of the, the heroes of Indian history. So that is how I started. But that was my Marathi reading. And I remember that maybe 2 years later, I was possibly in the 9th standard, 14 to 15 years of age. And we had a very nice gentleman in the, who used to live in the nearby apartment, Gokhale uncle, we used to call him. So he was a very knowledgeable person, generally in terms of worldly affairs, banking, political affairs, and had a very good command of English. And he introduced me to English reading. And I was having a lot of hesitation because I studied in Marathi medium instruction in my school. So I wasn't sure how I will take to English, and I was apprehensive that initially maybe I will not be able to understand 80% of what I am reading. But nevertheless, he encouraged me, and considering that I am a beginner, he asked me to start with Westerns written by Louis L'Amour. And that is how my journey of English reading began.
So, Jitendra, can you recall any specific book or moment that sparked your interest in reading?
I think there was a series on Indian history, which was almost 7 to 8 volumes. It ran into 7 or 8 volumes. And there was a fascinating description on some heroic battles, like Italian, say Garibaldi or Mazzini. I remember some characters from that book. So that really fascinated me, and really my interest surged, I would say. Otherwise, I would be like an average reader. But I really became more passionate about history reading.
So, in which languages do you read?
I have attempted to read a few German novels also, because I have learned German up to intermediate level. So I decided to give it a try. But to be very frank, it became a bit taxing, because while I am okay to engage in conversation of a general nature, reading would require maybe a higher competence or higher patience. So finally I couldn't continue that. So finally I fell back on mainly English and occasionally Marathi. That is how I would describe it.
Okay, great. And what genres of books do you like to read?
Yes, that has changed over a period of time. So initially, I think it all started with history books, as I mentioned. And then a couple of Marathi, things I still remember, which were mainly dealing with characters from history. Great personalities. Characters possibly would be a wrong description. So, for example, there was Swami by Ranjit Desai.
Oh, yes.
There was Rao. Then there was some scholarly writings by Durga Bhagwat ji on characters and personalities from Mahabharata. So initially it was all that. Then, as I mentioned, that Gokhale uncle had introduced me to these westerns. So I quite enjoyed that Louis L'Amour, which was a western, some kind of a bandit. Somebody becomes an outlaw, then he falls in love with a woman, and she is able to bring about change in the code of ethics that the person is following, and then he turns into a good person and starts battling the bad guys in the society. So some kind of an English Amitabh Bachchan was generally represented in Louis L'Amour novels. So I started enjoying that as well.
Okay.
And over a period of time, then the interest changed. And then, non-fiction also became a major reading. History, current affairs, economic theories. Okay. And finally, spy stories really held my attention for the longest time. And I think my favorite author and favorite genre, or I think the French may call it genre, something like that. So yes, that is, I think, the spy espionage novels, spy thrillers. Okay. And even today, I am sometimes enjoying rereading those novels.
Oh, great. So, which author you have chosen today to speak about?
Yes, today I have chosen to talk about John le Carre.
Oh, okay.
John le Carre is, of course, a pseudonym. So, David John Moore Conwell.
Okay.
That is the name of the author. And something interesting about his background, for about 10 years, he worked with the British intelligence. And they have two divisions, MI5 and MI6. So one deals with internal security matters, and the other agency deals with the external intelligence.
Okay.
From the foreign networks and about foreign activities, foreign governments, etc. So he drew from real life experience also, and then decided to try his hand at writing fictions. So that is in brief about my favorite author, John le Carre. Notwithstanding, I would like to categorize his writings into, I think, broadly 3 categories. One is, the maximum number of books he has written. These books deal with spy networks, espionage. That is the center theme. Yeah. Okay. And again, from these books, I think a majority of this would be focusing on the Moscow Center, or the Cold War between the Russian intelligence and the Western spy networks. So that is the first category. The second category is he has written some books which deal with the international political affairs.
Okay.
For example, there is a concern about money laundering, and how some countries play a constructive role, but some countries are indirectly complicit in giving shelter to money launderers. So some kind of a current affairs come political happenings across the world. So this is one theme I came across. Secondly, there is an implicit colonial mentality sometimes in countries dealing with each other. So one of his book has dealt with this aspect of current politics. So like that, I think this is the second category. And of course, there are a couple of more themes in the same category, current affairs, political aware. But I think I would prefer to simply give these 2 examples. So the second category. And third category, I would say, is his musings about, human nature, human feelings. And they don't necessarily deal with, say, spy background. Or it could be something to do with, your personal experiences, or some of the relatives, who are near and dear, and learning from their life lessons. So that is how maybe family, social context, but
Okay.
broadly, containing the human, unpredictable nature, human nature,
Oh, yes.
and human
Okay.
feelings. Yeah. So that is
I
how I
see.
would describe his, the style of writing, or the themes, not style of writing, the
Okay.
themes on which he has written.
Okay, great. Thank you. Can you quote a few lines which you enjoyed the most from while reading his books? I mean, there may be many, but can you quote a few for us?
Right. I think, yeah, this, I think you have come to a very, very interesting, aspect of
Okay.
his style and writing. Yes. So I would give the background and then refer
Mhm.
the exact line. I remember
Yes.
that, this one novel which I quite frankly enjoyed quite a bit,
Mhm.
is called The Russia House.
Hmm.
And
Okay.
before going to the line, I think it is important that I should explain the context of this line.
Yeah.
Otherwise, the listeners and, those who are watching the program may not really get the punch in that line. So the background is like this: that, there is a interest in checking with the British scientists who had recently gone to Moscow for exchange of scientific ideas. So the
Mhm.
spy story, I mean, the spy team of the British intelligence, they
Mhm.
have some material they want to check with a British
Mhm.
scientist who had visited Moscow. So,
Mhm.
so they meet him and then they ask him that, that he was the leader of the British team that went to
Mhm.
Moscow,
Mhm.
and what was the gist of that meeting, and what all he gathered. They wanted to inquire about that. So
Mhm.
he stopped them and said, please don't refer to team. It was a
Mhm.
group, not a team. And
Mhm.
verbatim, he said, team denotes a common purpose. Group is simply an assembly of people.
Oh,
We were a
nice.
group
Yes.
and not a team. So, really, I mean,
Yes.
there is a lot of wit and, the punch and satire and sarcasm.
Correct.
So that is how,
Correct.
then from the same book, now we are talking, I suddenly recalled from the same book, there is another interesting bit of conversation that,
Hmm.
the British intelligence team, they finally select, a non-spy, and they
Hmm.
coach him, and then they send him to Moscow to gather some
Hmm.
information. So
Hmm.
when this person goes to the British embassy in Moscow and he
Hmm.
meets the ambassador there, ambassador is briefed by the British intelligence. So
Hmm.
the ambassador, as a matter of courtesy, asks him whether he would like
Hmm.
to have tea or coffee, and
Hmm.
then remarks, "I am afraid they both taste the same."
Okay.
So this is very simple, but still, you enjoy. I mean,
So, yeah.
you're reading something very serious, something very intriguing, something that has a very complex plot, and suddenly you come across conversations like this, and your interest in reading is kept,
Alive.
yeah,
Yes.
alive. Yes, yeah, that is the right adjective. Yes, right. So this is the story, that is centered on the conflict between the state of Israel and the
Hmm.
Palestine movement. You know,
Okay.
I mean, I
Hmm.
wouldn't talk about the political angle to it. That
Sure.
is not finally.
Hmm.
Finally, I would be more interested in describing the story and the
Yes.
interesting plot that is contained in
And
this.
that is the agenda of our
That
talks
is the
also.
agenda. Yes.
Yeah.
So we are not going to make any political statements.
No,
So,
nothing.
but however, to describe the story, I would give the setting of what it is.
Please. Yes. Yes.
So I think what they have shown in this theory, I mean,
Hmm.
in the story, is that the Israeli intelligence agency,
Hmm.
they come to the conclusion that they are not able to stop, whatever the reaction that is coming from the Palestinian side. And then they decide, they think that the only way that this may be contained, reduced, if not stopped, would be to infiltrate the movement itself, you know, or in the intelligence speak, to plant a mole inside the network. You know,
Hmm.
so then they go about finding out a person who will not be
Hmm.
suspected of carrying
Hmm.
out such activity.
Hmm.
And as we know that, one of the human feelings is people fall in love, they develop friendship. So they
Huh.
decided to use this kind of social angle,
Huh. Huh.
and they identify a girl who is a
Hmm.
very a strong person, a spirited person, a passionate person. She
Okay.
has a lot of interest in, human rights to all people in the world.
Okay.
In short, we may describe this character as a very passionate do-gooder.
Oh, okay.
And she's also a very capable, reader, actress. She is very active in the London drama circles.
Huh.
Sometimes she even plays the part she's an actress in the
Hmm.
drama production, etc., etc.
Hmm.
So they make every effort to convince her,
Hmm.
and of course they know that, now this is a very intriguing kind of a role, and the person's life may be also in danger if she's exposed. But they develop a very intelligent plot, by which, without she actually having to, risk her life, but she plays a very important part by falling in love with one of the network operators who is working with the Liberate Palestine kind of a movement.
Okay.
So this is the story, and it's a very interesting plot, and how they fall in love and how they travel from one country to another country.
I see.
Without actually becoming a spy, how her proximity helps the Israeli intelligence to gather information. That is how.
I see.
That is
That is very interesting.
It's a very interesting book, literature novel. Now I will come to the famous trilogy, what I referred to as the Smiley trilogy. So there are 3 books, and let me first explain why it is called Smiley trilogy.
Sure.
So George Smiley, that is the protagonist, in all these 3 fictional novels. He's a middle-aged, heading to retirement age kind of a person. Now, this in itself is very unusual, because typically we want to have a good-looking, tall, well-built young person as a hero. So usually that is our notion of a hero or a protagonist. Yeah, and maybe it works very well in films, whether Western films or Indian films. But here the plot itself and the narrative style is so strong that you do not at all keep worrying about this fact that your protagonist himself is a guy who is heading towards retirement. That is a very interesting thing. And this George Smiley, he's a multi-talented person. He's a great analyst of intelligence material, so that is his technical skill. Then, as is expected in this line of work, he's a great reader of human behavior and human psychology. So he understands, and he has the capability to spot in time, what could be the real motivation, or whether people are telling facts, or whether they are just putting you up to some kind of a scam.
Right.
So he has that uncanny ability, I think.
I see.
Right. Then on top of that, he is a literature master.
I see.
And he has studied many classics in detail, Greek and Latin. And he's very fluent German speaker. So he's an Englishman, but of course in foreign service, especially those days, I think it was expected that you should have knowledge of preferably 2 foreign languages. One is an absolute. So he had a good command of German, and he had a working knowledge of French, this notional George Smiley. So, and he's a great planner, great team builder, and a very subtle kind of operative. So he would not engage into, Ian Fleming's James Bond kind of an action. Send somebody with a revolver and, fire at the enemy. Not that kind of spy story. This is a very intelligent plot where reader has to be patient, and keep reading. And of course, after maybe initial 20 or 30 pages, then you start to get a sense of where the story is going and how the plot is taking twists and turns. So this is the background, about the George Smiley and how these books are written. Now coming to the plot itself and the 3 books, so the first book in the trilogy is called Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy.
Oh, yes. Okay.
So you will realize at once, this title itself is very unique.
Right.
And
Yes.
one would not really come across a title like this.
Correct.
And the background of this title itself is in the story. The four characters are suspected, of being double agents. Okay.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
since you do not want to give them some official names,
Hmm.
or you don't want to call them by their formal names or the actual names, then because at once everybody will, come to know who you are talking
Correct.
about.
Right.
So to maintain some secrecy about which these four persons, who are suspected of being double agents. So this name or the code name has been coined: Tinker, Tailor, Soldier, Spy.
Okay.
Yeah, and it is expected that the code name Spy is the real master of the ring. And
Okay.
Tinker, Tailor, Soldier are becoming unwittingly part to the operation.
Okay.
So they are fed some line, why we are doing this, etc. And they are completely unaware that the actual, the purpose is something else. And the information and the action is not using their country, but using the enemy country.
Okay.
So that is a very interesting title itself, Tinker, Tailor, Soldier, Spy. So how the plot unfolds is the British intelligence decides to send one young, operative to Far East and try to infiltrate the Russian network. They give him some information.
So I can see in the plots that the whole world is involved, I think.
Right. Yes. I mean, various regions of the, yes, you are right. So he goes, I think it is to Kuala Lumpur, Hong Kong, these kind of destinations. And while he's actually attempting to infiltrate, he's a very young, passionate person. He falls in love with the wife of one of the Russian embassy officials. And she also falls in love with him. And then she confesses to him that she was privy to some confidential information when she was working in Moscow.
Oh, okay.
And whatever he's trying to narrate to her, all that information is already available in Moscow Center, in Moscow.
Oh, okay.
So he realizes that possibly there is somebody in the British intelligence who has already become a double agent for the Russians.
I see.
Because otherwise,
this is quite exciting.
Right. Otherwise, how such minute details as to, not only the location of the building, but, which floor contains what kind of office layout, and if there is a canteen or not, or if there is a notice board or not, it is in the left corner, right corner. So this kind of information is available to her. So he realizes that somebody from the head office, somebody senior level person, has already possibly become a double agent. So he realizes.
So this double agent thing is the spice, I think. All is not.
That's right. So he returns to London and he decides to contact some retired official. Because he realizes that if he goes to the regular officials, maybe one of them is involved, So he decides to approach the person he trusts most.
Okay.
And that is how this George Smiley gets involved.
Okay.
And then they meet some senior people, who are even at a higher position than the spy service chief. And they authorize, the senior people authorize Smiley to uncover this mole.
Okay.
To use a nice phrase, to unmask him.
Right.
So that is the unmask, yes. So that is the plot of Tinker, Tailor, Soldier, Spy.
Okay.
Which is the first book in the trilogy. Yeah.
Okay.
Then what happens? Then what happens is, because the spy that is uncovered is number 2 in the hierarchy at that time.
Okay.
And he's the spy, and then who is the Tinker, Tailor, Soldier? So the person who is at number 3 position and the person who is at number 1 position.
I hope this is not a spoiler for if somebody wants to take up reading.
No. This is not a
Okay.
spoiler. So then, then what happens is, then Smiley is decided to be brought back into the service.
Okay. I see.
Right. So then the service is, totally revamped. He comes back as the chief.
Okay.
But unfortunately, because of the toll it takes, the first scandal, then what happens is the budget is cut down. His overseas networks are trimmed.
Okay.
So he has very little to go on now by way of actual activity. Yeah. But he's a very intelligent person. He's a deep analyst, and he decides that that if the spy network and the spy service is not able to produce intelligence, then it will simply go out of life. It will be no longer needed. So he decides to do his best, despite the shortage of funds and trimming down of his network, etc. And he calls his efforts, he gives a very interesting name, and he calls these efforts as taking the back bearings.
Oh, okay.
This is not a standard English jargon as far as I know, or a standard word. I think this is some kind of a specialized jargon, I should say. And then he has some intelligent people working with him. And he has some, sincere and not so intelligent staff also.
Okay.
So, the latter category, so the latter category rushes to one intelligent deputy of Smiley, who is a woman who is expert in the Russian, the actions of the Russian intelligence. And she explains what is meant by taking back bearings. And the plot is, which is the explanation of taking back bearings, that we have to check all recent operations and try to find out that while they were progressing in a particular direction, whether abruptly the direction changed of the inquiry.
Okay. Right.
And what it would indicate is that you were close to finding some truth, which was uncomfortable to the higher ups. So the higher ups very smartly decided to change the course of the inquiry and the direction.
Okay.
Yeah. So now, since you are now aware, looking at history of the recent cases, is it possible to continue the original line of inquiry without changing the direction and uncover some intelligence that should be of use to the British intelligence?
Okay.
So it's a very deeply thought about, very interesting, idea for finding something, with which you can go on and continue the inquiry. Yeah.
Right. A lot of meticulous planning goes in.
Very meticulous planning. So this whole business of analyzing in this way is referred to as taking the back bearings.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes. So, sorry, let me continue. So, so this is the plot of the second book, and the book itself is called Honorable Schoolboy.
Oh, okay. The name
and the name is very catchy. And let me just give 2 lines about the name. Then we can go to the third book. The character who becomes the protagonist. I mean, of course, Smiley is the planner. So we may call him protagonist number 1. Yes. And then he has somebody on the action field.
Okay.
So his deputy who is at the action field, he is the honorable schoolboy. So he is a person of a very righteous behavior.
Okay.
And he has the, some of the childish, his disposition, in dealing in real life serious questions. So that's why this character is referred to as the honorable schoolboy.
Oh, okay.
To describe his personality and his insistence on virtue and being a good guy and something like that.
Okay.
And because he is a bit childish at times, he is also referred to as a schoolboy. Hence the title Honorable Schoolboy.
Okay.
Nice. Then the third trilogy is simply, the first 2 books, they contain the struggle between the Moscow intelligence and the British intelligence. So how then Smiley post-retirement again is called back. Okay. And there is an opportunity to score victory over the opponent. So that in essence is the plot of the third book. Third book is called Smiley's People.
Oh, okay.
And the reason for that title is, again, he gathers all his old operatives, who work with him in the last 30 years or so.
Oh, okay.
And he finds that they are very trustworthy, and this is a very sensitive operation. This is like a last chance. So he decides to bring his old team back.
Okay.
Hence the title, Smiley's People.
Nice. This is, they've gathered everything into that people word.
Yes. Right. Wow. So this is about the trilogy. And then there are many more books, but I think, in brief, I would like to say that, his plots are very interesting. They contain twists, but they are long-winded. I must raise a caution here. Somebody who is wanting a quick thrill and some quick action, he is not the reader for this kind of books. Somebody who is a bit patient and who is willing to, invest a few days, in reading the book. So, and that person will love these books for his life,
Okay. So it is because of the plot and also the language, right? It's very engaging.
Right, yeah. There is satire, there is criticism, there is self-criticism also at times,
I see.
And there is a very good description of human unpredictability, and, we all of us have some failings, some pluses, some minuses. So he gives a very good description of, these human traits.
Nice. Right. Interesting. So, can you recommend a book by this author that you believe everyone should read?
I think, yes. I think to begin with, there is it's a detective book, not a spy book, more of an inquiry into something that happened. And the police are not able to find it, or the school where something happens, they are afraid that if they involve police, there will be a bigger scandal. So they decide to quietly engage the services of George Smiley again. And they find out who is behind something bad that has happened at the school. And the title of that book is A Murder of Quality.
Oh, okay.
Okay, but it's relatively a smaller book as compared to his other books. And the plot is, at least the plot, people come to know straight away what the plot is.
I see.
So the perpetrator it cannot be revealed, but the plot is clear. So I think it will engage the reader more easily. And then he can turn to the spy genre, because they are very long-winded and slowly turning books.
Okay, yeah, great. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts about John le Carre.
Thank you. And I would like to just add one line. I think people who are interested in this genre, what they can do is, I will also recommend by Graham Greene, Our Man in Havana.
Okay.
That is also a very interesting book, but the plot is much more, simply unfolding, though it is interesting. So it may be a good entry, step one into this spy kind of novels,
Okay, great.
And then one can turn to, this John le Carre.
Okay, great. So thank you so much. Now, I would like to ask you, what role do books play in your life beyond entertainment? For example, some read it for inspiration, relaxation.
Right. I think this is a great question, and I think this is a very big topic in itself. But I would not go on and on. I think I would very briefly describe that many things, many roles and many things are possible. For example, one is it can be entertainment at the simplest. Okay. Somewhat it cultivates the passion in you, because some of the themes can spark some interest in you, and you may want to pursue some different hobby because of the passion.
Okay.
Thirdly, you become more aware. Sometimes it could be of history, sometimes it could be about human nature. Sometimes you may even want to turn to some kind of social service. So many things are possible, because all these books finally contain some personalities and characters that are shown to be heroic in nature.
Oh, yes.
So it appeals to that in, I think, you also. So I think it's a deep subject, and I think in brief, I would like to say, all these things are possible. and some kind of activism. People may want to turn to some kind of activism also because of this, and contribute positively to society finally.
Okay, nice. Well said.
Right.
This John le Carre books you have read once. So do you find yourself rereading them, or
Yes, yes, yes. I think because some of these books, particularly now, I will come back to my favorite and briefly
Mhm.
describe how I come back to it sometimes.
Sure.
Because this book
Mhm.
Russia House,
Mhm.
it deals with the nuclear capabilities of
Mhm.
US and Russia.
Okay.
And again, without going into politics of it, what is important is how these capabilities affect each other in terms of security, in terms
I
of
see.
directing the scientific research,
Okay.
and what can be done by people who are not directly in charge of weapons,
Hmm.
to mitigate the risk from these weapons. So this is
Okay.
a very fascinating topic, and in this book, three or
Hmm.
four times there are long debates,
Okay.
of what can be done and what cannot be done,
Hmm.
what is
Hmm.
feasible, what is not feasible,
Hmm.
what is utopia and what is practical.
Okay.
These are very interesting topics, and in the
Yes.
course of the unfolding of the plot, there
Mhm.
are very interesting debates at three or four,
Okay.
different places in this book. So that
Mhm.
is what fascinates me, and these debates are so interesting. They are all intellectual arguments or argument based on human nature,
I see.
political compulsion. So I enjoy, maybe after 2 years or 3 years, again I may want to revisit some of these arguments and
Wow,
again refresh, what was the thought process.
that is interesting.
Right.
Nice.
I anyway feel very passionate about this author, and what all he has written.
Mhm.
His mastery of the English language, his satirical style, his
Yeah.
deep thinking and plotly.
Correct.
It's a great also for the language professionals, the
Mhm.
language readers, because
Okay.
finally we are dealing with literature here. Though it is a
Yes. So,
fiction,
mhm.
in my opinion, I would give it a tag of literature. It is that
Oh,
classy and
yes.
superb, superb, really.
Okay, great. So I like the way you described everything, and thank you for joining my show, and hope to see you again with another author.
Sure, I look forward to it.